I guess the first thing we need to understand is what bee pollen is. Bee pollen is the male part of a flower that bees collect. They do that as needed by the needs of the hive. They go out, they'll adjust. If they need more pollen, then there'll be more foragers going out to collect it. But they bring it back in. There's several different ways to collect bee pollen, and we'll get into those here in just a minute. Why do you want to collect bee pollen? There's three different reasons you want to collect bee pollen, or you can collect bee pollen. One is to make patties for in the spring, for spring buildup to feed the bees. Have your own pollen ready to put on in the spring. Another reason is for increased sales, to sell at farmers markets, roadside stands and so forth. It's another item that you can make a little bit of money on. And the other reason would be for your own personal consumption. There's, like I said, there's a lot of health benefits associated with bee pollen. At one time, there was a lot of discounts as far as what the benefits of bee pollen are, but you know, I think that a lot of those have been kind of eliminated. As a matter of fact, you know, I've had some people buy pollen from us and local honey that doctors have actually recommended to get local honey. And of course, the pollen and honey is what they're going after for allergies, for allergy relief. As a matter of fact, that's why I sell the majority of our bee pollen. We sell about 50 pounds a year, which is not significant, but we don't really go out and promote it. My wife and I just simply don't have the time to dedicate to it. We're more into the honey production, but like I said, we sell about 50 pounds of it a year. Have absolutely no trouble selling bee pollen whatsoever. You want to develop a market. You know, if you're going to trap bee pollen for sales, you want to trap bee pollen, but you want to make sure that you've got a market for it. If you collect a whole bunch of pollen and there's not a market out there for it, then it's really kind of a moot point. But the other thing you can do is all the above, is to sell, to make patties, and for your own consumption. So you know, you can do several different things with it. You know, I know people that take bee pollen and just sing praises to how it affects them, their allergies and so forth. It reduces their allergies during the allergy season. But of course, they have to understand that you don't wait until your allergies start bothering you before you start taking bee pollen. You have to take it ahead of time and get your body acclimated to the pollen. And I've got people that say, just sing praises to it. Others, not so much. Others, it seems to affect different people in a little bit in different ways. So, you know, it's something that it's like medication or anything else. You know, it has different effects on different people. So, you know, it's something to just keep in mind. The bees have to have the pollen, like I said, they have to have it. So one of the things you do not want to do is take too much pollen. You know, I guess as a rule of thumb, if you trap pollen for 1 or 2 days, then you take it off for 1 or 2 days. I recommend that you don't trap more than a week. You might impact there might be a lot of pollen from one source coming in, such as maple in the spring. You don't want to impact the pollen that's coming into the hive, so you don't go any more than a week. And you know, that's my personal opinion. There might be others out there. You know, this is beekeeping, so you know, they'll say, the old rule of thumb goes: you ask 10 different beekeepers how to do something, you get 10 different answers. So pollen is really no different. So keep that in mind. Don't get greedy. You got a lot of pollen coming in, and I'll leave it on there an extra day or two. No, decide how you want to do it, and then stick with it. If you get greedy, it might impact the bees in the hive. I had a beekeeper tell me one time that they leave their traps on all the time, and so well, he's been doing this for years. He don't know what he's talking about. So within 6 weeks, the bees basically had shut down brood production. So they'd run out of pollen, and the trap was taking all the pollen, and so they weren't able to raise brood like they had originally done. Now, different traps have the ability. Some of them are very efficient. Some of them will take over 90% of the pollen that comes in. Most of them don't get 100% of it. There's a little bit that usually gets by, but not really enough. If you got a 2 brood chamber hive and supers on it, or whatever you may have, if you got a lot of bees and they're raising a lot of brood, you need a lot of pollen. So don't take too much, and if you do it every 2 days, however you want to do it, if you do it, then stick with it and be sure you do it. Traps that are available are the bottom trap, which is this trap. This is a Sundance trap. When you're trapping pollen, you've got it opened up like that. You've got the bottom open where the bees are coming in, and they have to go up through the trap, and then that takes the pollen off. One of the nice thing about the Sundance trap, either the top or the bottom trap, is the drawer is in the back. So when you go out to collect pollen, you want to all you have to do is just go around behind the hive and pull the drawer out, dump the pollen, and stick the drawer back in, and you're off and running. So that's one of the big advantages of this one. If you got a hive that's maybe a little bit testy, then you don't want to necessarily. One of the disadvantages of this trap, which is a front trap, is you got to get in the bee's flight path, and if you've got a hive that's a little testy, you may have to at least put a veil on or something to go out and change the trap off the hive. It's got a drawer just like the other one does. You have to forgive me, this is actually stored in a barn, so it's not the best trap I got by any means. But so then you have the like I said, the top bar trap, or the top trap that goes on top. The advantage of the top trap is it isn't down here, so it's not as apt to pick up some hive debris, so the pollen is pretty clean. I've never used one. That's the attributes of it, but I've never used one, so I can't really talk about the efficiency and so forth of the trap. This trap is fairly good. It doesn't collect 90% of the pollen, but it does a fairly good job. The Sundance traps, up to the bottom here, it's very efficient. It's actually in the hive, so it's protected from the weather, whereas this one, not so much. It's out here in the open, so if you get a summer storm or something, you could end up with some of the pollen getting wet. If the pollen gets wet, then it just mushes together, and it's something you don't want. So these traps are about, you can buy these for about $30. The Sundance trap is about $55 or $60 plus freight. You got freight in all these. You can also go online. There are traps online, diagrams and plans to build your own trap. So that's a possibility as well. If you want a good trap though, I like the Sundance. They work really well. If you got a good pollen flow going, we'll call it a flow. If you got a good pollen flow going, they can bring in 1 pound or 2 pounds a day without any problem. Right now pollen is going for anywhere from $15 per pound to $20 per pound. Again, part of that depends on having a market ready. If you need to test the market, if you don't have anybody asking for pollen, then you may want to promote it a little bit before you get into it, so that you and kind of start to develop that clientele. Like I said, I don't have any trouble getting rid of the pollen that we collect, none whatsoever. Yes?
When you say that you get about $15 a pound, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
And I sell honey at the farmers markets, and I have several people asking for it.
Okay.
A pound. I mean, I'm envisioning a pound of honey. That's going to be much heavier than pollen, right? So a pound sounds like it'd be a pretty good bunch of pollen.
You don't have a name. You don't have a name tag on. What's your name?
Jason.
Jason. Okay. The 1 pound jars that you put honey in are just about perfect for 8 ounces of pollen.
Okay. So is that what you're calling a pound of honey?
No, of honey.
Or I'm sorry.
Pollen?
You're calling a pound?
No, that's 8 ounces.
Right. So a pound of pollen is how big of a jar about?
Well, it'd be about double that size. About a 2 pound jar would be basically 1 pound of pollen.
Yeah, so that's a lot of pollen.
So
Are you selling it though? I mean, I would probably think more of 8 ounce quantities.
How do you package it?
Yeah, how are you selling it, I guess is what I'm...
Okay. Well, when you collect it, there's the downside to collecting pollen is you have, there's some labor involved in collecting it, number one. Then you need to freeze it and thaw it out after you've frozen it, dry it, clean it, and then bottle it. And my recommendation is to put it back in the freezer to retain all the good qualities of the pollen. Keep it out of direct sunlight. The best place to store pollen is in the freezer.
Larry, does it stay fluffy and powdery all the way up until the time you sell it?
When you dry pollen, you don't want to dry it down to the point where it's hard and crunchy. You want a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for here?
Body
No, you want it to. You don't want it to be hard. You want it to be somewhat pliable.
Pliable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You want it to spring back when you squeeze it?
Not spring back necessarily, but if you squeeze down on it and it doesn't budge, then it's probably too dry. Unfortunately, there's not a good way to determine the moisture content, but of course you got to get it dry enough, or it will mold on you if you don't get it dry too much. So too dry is better than not dry enough.
Larry, you mentioned cakes before. How do you make a cake or
patty.
a patty? I mean?
Honestly, I don't use pollen to do that. Pollen is $15 a pound. You can buy patties plus freight. You got about $3 a pound in a patty that you buy. There's some people that think pollen is a lot better. I think with the technology today, they've developed the patties have come a long way, and the quality of the substitute for the patties is much better than what has been in past years. But pollen, I mean, at $15 a pound, it would be hard for me to do that. I think I would prefer to put artificial pollen on and feed that to them.
But have you ever made patties? And if you did,
I've never made patties. No.
so you're not sure how they're actually made.
Well, you just mix a little honey in with them,
Okay.
and then get it to a good consistency. You don't want it too dry. You don't want it too wet. I mean, I've never made my own, but you want it so that right, and then like pat it down like a patty. I mean, you can use different molds or whatever you want to or just throw it in the hive and push the cover down on it and flatten it out. Yes.
What is the actual cleaning process that you go with cleaning the pollen? What is the actual process that you go through? Filtering it, or?
You can
What's your
put it on like a sieve and
Yeah.
do it that way. Kelly's makes a cleaner. It's a small cleaner that you can clean pollen with. But what you usually end up with is a few wings, maybe a leg or two, and some, you know, possible debris in the pollen that you want to clean out. So, you know, you got to go through it and do that either, you know, just by hand, which is of course time consuming, or, you know, a sieve or something along those lines. But you want to get all the foreign debris out of the pollen as best you can.
That's what you use? You use actually one that you bought at the store, ain't nothing like a certain size screen?
I use big pans. You know, when you put of course when I'm cleaning it, I don't have it on there as thick as what I do when I'm drying it. But then just go through it, and any foreign debris, then pick out the foreign debris. Your customers will probably appreciate that too.
Right.
What size mesh do you use?
He
Mesh.
manually picks it
You
out.
said you use a screen or a
A
sieve?
sieve you can. I don't.
Oh, you don't?
I don't.
Okay.
I do it the hard
You just
way.
pick through it?
I do it the hard way. Yeah.
Okay, I missed that.
And how do you dry it?
You shouldn't dry pollen at a higher temperature. You know, too much heat is not good for the pollen. You know, it takes away some of the attributes of the pollen.
So you just do it in your oven?
A dehumidifier is a good way to do it. Say a hot room with a fan is a good way to do it. But you dry it down. You put it on a big pan, and you can spread it out. Half an inch is what I do. You know, some people say 3/4 of an inch or so forth. But I spread mine on pans about a half an inch thick, and then dry it down to the consistency that I want. Some of it is just a little bit of experience. Experience whether when you're to the right point as far as moisture content is concerned. I wish there was a better way to determine the moisture content, but there's just, as far as I know at least, there's not a good way to do that.
Almost sounds like drying anything or dehydrating anything.
Yeah.
Well, dehydrator's got a fan in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Dehydrator's got a fan in it.
They do. Yeah. Dehydrator will work. Again, you don't want to dry down too much, but too much is better than not enough.
Can you,
Larry, question.
Yes.
On, you said put it, at, in your hot room, and what's your hot room, 100 degrees,
90 degrees,
90 degrees?
85, 90.
Yeah, okay, and you've got it a half inch thick on a pan? How long typically does it take? I mean, half a day or a day and a half, I mean,
It takes a little longer than that usually. I mean, it depends on how much air you got moving, depends on relative humidity. I mean, it's just like a lot of things in beekeeping, there's a lot of variables.
oh yeah.
So part of it is, the main part of it is just checking it, and once it gets to a certain point. I mean, relative humidity, the outside relative humidity will, of course, impact how quickly it dries down too, so. Yes?
When you were talking about the patties before, and I took this from the conversation, the patties are more for reintroducing them to the bees during the spring versus human consumption. Am I
Sure.
correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes?
Larry, can you tell us what takes place inside those traps? Does the bee just rub up against something and it knocks it off of their leg?
Basically.
Off their torso?
Basically.
Abdomen?
See the screen there? That is just large enough. I mean, you look at it and how does the bee get through there? But they can get through there. And when they do, they have to squeeze through, and then as they drag their back legs through behind them, then the traps will dislodge a lot of that pollen, and it simply will fall down through this screen. This screen is large enough here on the bottom, is large enough for pollen to fall through, and unless the bee was really energetic and really brought back a big load of pollen, why the pellets will fall through there. down in the drawer. Then it's just a matter of emptying the drawer. And basically it's the same way with the Sundance traps. You know, it's just a matter of dislodging the pellets off of their back legs and going out and collecting it. You know, there's some books that will tell you, or some information will tell you, you know, you want to collect it every 2 or 3 days. I don't do that. I collect it every single day. I go out and get it every day. Because I don't want, you know, I want to preserve the quality as much as I can, so, you know, I start the process as quick as I can. You know, I mean, you can go out and freeze and collect it and put it in whatever container you want to put it in, and then take it back to the house and freeze it. And I guess you want to know why you need to freeze it? Because of wax moths flying around. And you may end up with wax moth eggs in the pollen. The potential is there. So rather than, you know, end up with wax moths tunneling through your pollen, you want to kill any potential eggs that are in the pollen. I mean, most of the time, I had a batch of pollen one time where I had, and I didn't get it froze as soon as I should have, and that's what ended up happening. So you want to freeze it to take care of that problem. And of course, you can dump 2 or 3 days or a week's worth in there, and just stick it in the freezer, and then go back once you get a good amount that you can process, and go back and get it out of the freezer and put it on let it thaw out. Well, you don't need to let it thaw out, but put it on a pan and start the drying process.
So is there any theory on, when you've got those traps on, is there any theory that says there's a reduction in nectar collection because they're either not able to get through that screen, or they're trying to collect more pollen instead of nectar?
There would most likely, I don't know that there's any scientific information on that, but most likely because you're taking pollen from the bees, then they adjust to the need of the hive, and if they need more pollen, then you're going to end up with more bees foraging for pollen rather than nectar. So yes, it would be logical then that it would do that. It would reduce the nectar flow a little bit. Mm-hmm. Yes.
If you were just wanting to feed that like in the spring, next spring,
Mm-hmm.
couldn't you just put that in the freezer and leave it frozen until you're ready to put it right back on the hive next spring? Thaw it out. You wouldn't have to dry it, would you? You wouldn't even have to make it in into a patty, would you? You could just put it
Just sprinkle.
up on a sugar board or something where they could get to it.
Probably not, but I'm assuming a little bit here. I've never tried it. I mean, I've put dry pollen out before in a bee yard and early in the spring.
Right.
I don't like doing that, but at the time I had some pollen left from the year before, some powder, and put it out in the bee yard. I mean, they just went crazy.
Yeah.
They had, I mean, it was a fairly significant amount that I put out there for them, and they had it all cleaned up in a day.
Right. So what would be the difference? Just freezing that, letting it thaw out,
Good
and then
point.
letting them use it?
That's a good point. The nice thing about mixing honey in with it is more attractive to the bees.
For
And-
them to use it.
Mhm. Yes.
I've seen, be bringing pollen into the hive with entrance reducer, and a lot of times there'll be several grains of pollen out there and just dropped right there at the end, and they do nothing with it.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
why
That's
would
right.
why would you think that if you put some out there that they would eat it? See, I don't know.
I think in the spring, if you put
Well, that's
it
all-
inside, when they don't have a pollen, and you can put this out early in March.
Yeah, very.
But see, it's bees' nature to go out and collect it. And they might do that. I don't know if you've ever seen honeybees working on a bird feeder.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
They sure do.
Yeah.
especially hummingbird fear.
I seen a bowl of cornmeal out on my boy's porch real early in the spring. They was covered with bees,
Yep.
just cornmeal.
But you can try that, try it and see how well it works. I've really never thought of trying it.
And
Like I said, I usually end up getting the patties and start putting patties on in February.
yeah, and I don't know this, but this is what I've seen on the computer. That is number 5 wire that a bee, a worker bee can get through, and a queen can't. So I would assume if you would count those, where that bee has to go through there, you're gonna see 5 per
Per
square
square
inch.
inch. Mhm.
And that should take most of the pollen off.
I don't know that. Actually, this trap is, or was, made by my father-in-law. But he had a model of a trap just like it that I purchased. And I bought the screen then from, at the time, it was Better Bee. Better Bee had the different, I think 3 different size screens. One was for just to keep bees in or out of, or primarily in, because that's the screen I use when I move hives to screen them in. Then there's one then that's for the pollen, like the bottom here for the pollen to fall through, and then the larger for the bees to go through. Yeah, but honestly I don't know I can't remember now what the screens were. So it's up to you as far as, you know, what you want to do. They, by far the Sundance trap, in my opinion, is the best.
Do you think it might be the best because it's down there where the bottom entrance normally is for the bees? I'm sitting here thinking, if I wanted to put that trap that you've got up there on the 2 little sticks, when the trap is on there, the bees have to go in that screen. But when the trap is off of there, they have to go in the bottom. Does that impede their process, or do they find that screen real quick?
Not really. I mean, you know, in the wild, the entrance to a hive can be above the hive, the colony, or it can be below, so it really doesn't matter. It just depends on
But it
the...
doesn't change every 2 days like this one.
Well, true. Yeah. But well, I would recommend that if you do, especially this trap, I mean, I think any trap, if you put a trap on there, you know, you want to get everything set up and let the bees get used to the new entrance. And then once they've done that, you know, day, 2 days, 3 days, once they've done that, then you can start. I wouldn't, I made the mistake one time of putting that on immediately, getting the hive set up, and I just put the trap on immediately, and I had bees that were trying to go into the hives beside where I had the trap on. So you want to let the bees get acclimated to the different the traps, the entrances, and then once you get going, then you can start trapping. You know, this one is on trap mode right now. After, you know, a day, 2 days, whatever you determine, you want to turn it off, and it's just a simple matter then of closing that off, sliding that down, tightening that screw back up, and you've got a new entrance. The bees will adjust to it fairly quickly, and then they don't have to go through the trap then until you open it back up again. The bees can get to there's a board there that kind of covers the majority of the trap. So of course the bees, being the clean little freaks that they are, why they carry any debris out. The pollen that comes out of this trap is relatively clean. You get a wing occasionally, I should say a few wings, some legs.
About wax.
Occasional flake of wax, yeah. But really, relatively few. Yes?
What about beetles? Got any problems with
You know, all the trapping I've done have been in yards without beetles. That could be a whole different ballgame. I can't talk to that because I have absolutely no idea. I'm going to assume that beetles could be a problem for trapping. Yes?
How many hives are you collecting 50 pounds of pollen from? How many hives are you collecting from?
It depends. As a general rule, 5.
Just 5 hives and you get that much pollen. Out of how many months?
Well, basically, I don't put my opinion. I don't want to put the traps on too early because the maple pollen is coming in, the willow pollen is coming in early on, and you don't want to harm the hive. You don't want to reduce the buildup in the spring. So I always leave the traps off until a little bit later in the spring, until they've kind of gotten established and got going. Because you never know exactly how much pollen a hive is going to have when it comes through winter. So you don't want to go out there and put the traps on first thing, and you end up with less brood and slower buildup on the hive. Yeah. So I always wait until spring is well underway, and then you can trap up into fall, get some goldenrod pollen and aster and whatever suits your fancy. Yes?
How much pollen does somebody consume if they're treating allergies? Is it a daily, a weekly, what are they?
Daily. If you're going to take pollen as a pollen regimen, then you want to start out slowly. Generally, I recommend to 2 to 4 grains to start with, a pinch, and then double that each day up to a tablespoon. If
that goes year round, would somebody be taking that year round? Potentially.
Should. But most people don't want to necessarily spend the money during the winter, so they tend to let up a little bit in the winter time and then start back in late winter to.
So if somebody's taking it year round, let's say for allergies, how much would they go through in a year? How much pollen would they have to buy for you?
Well, if they don't forget to take it each day and all that, honestly, I don't know. Of course, that's the factor. People get busy and then they forget to take it. And
You guys have to customers, right? Who are
Absolutely.
doing this. So how much do they buy an individual customer?
I really don't keep track of it.
How do people at home use it? What do they do? They sprinkle it on their cereal, or
You
put it
can-
in their coffee, or how is that done?
You can take it in different ways. You can take a spoonful and pop it in your mouth, wash it down with a glass of orange juice or something. Some pollens have a relatively pleasant taste, others not so much. So
The one that smell like gym socks, not so much.
probably not. No. So it just depends on the individual. Put it in smoothies, sprinkle it on cereals. There's different ways that it can be consumed. I just take a spoonful of it and pop it in my mouth and just wash it down with a glass of orange juice or something like that. Yeah. But if you do, there are very few problems with people that have allergies with taking pollen, but to err on the side of caution, always start out slow. People should start out slow. I've run into a couple or 3 people that weren't given that information, and they took a big spoonful of it and ended up with an upset stomach. So, start out slow, work your way up. It's just err on the side of caution. Yes.
How long do you keep your on your 5 hives to get your 50 pound?
It depends. Some days I don't get out there and open the traps back up like I should. I always want to make sure that I close them off and stop trapping. Like I said, I use a 1 week period, and sometimes I don't get back out there and get them turned on and start trapping again. So, you know, it's kind of hard to say. But I mean, and some years are different than others, you know, imagine that, you know, just like honey. Some years are different. I mean, I've put these traps on before, and I mean, you go out there and pull the drawer out, and the drawer will be half to 3/4 full. And other times go out there and you know, there's, I don't know, half a cup. So, you know, there's a lot of variables in it. Am I forgetting anything? But when you buy these traps, if you buy these traps, they send the frame here for you to put in between your brood chambers. Another disadvantage that just struck me was when you put this in here, you're obviously violating bee space. So the bees are going to build burr comb between the frames. So that's another disadvantage of this trap. So keep that in mind as well. I mean, it's not a deal breaker by any means, but you're going to end up with extra burr comb in there.
So the Sundance has an advantage over that then, huh?
Mm-hmm.
If you made your own patties with honey and pollen, what percentage of protein would those patties be?
Pollen will vary, and depending on the source, some pollens are higher in protein. Some pollens have more nutrients than other pollens. Corn pollen is kind of at the low end of the scale. Others, you know, tree pollens and so forth, their protein content is a little bit higher. And the nutrients in pollen will vary with the different sources as well. That's why if you're going to sell pollen, you should have a good multicolored pollen, indicating that there are several different sources coming in at the time. If you got one pollen and it's primarily one color, then I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it could be deficient somewhere. I mean, if you read on the internet and look at books and so forth, it's been said many times that pollen is the perfect food, because you can survive on pollen alone for an extended period of time because of it's got all the necessary building blocks that you need: amino acids, protein, trace minerals, all those different things. I mean, you can read up on pollen, and there's just a huge amount of things that it says it's good for. You know, for your skin, for your cardiovascular system, for you know, your prostate, for, you know, I mean, the list is significant. Now, a lot of those haven't necessarily been proven, so you want to be somewhat cautious about making claims that are unsubstantiated. You know, it's just like the pollen that I sell. Most people take it for allergy relief, and that's the majority of the pollen that I sell. That's why people take it, and that's why I tell people. You know, I can't guarantee them that it's going to make a significant difference for each individual. So you need to be concerned about those claims. State regulations, as far as selling pollen or selling honey. How many people are here have or sell at farmers markets? Okay, roadside stands. Okay, selling pollen or honey at those venues are okay, as you guys know, in Indiana, the Indiana state law. Governor Daniels signed that bill into effect several years ago now. As far as selling or wholesale to somebody, or going to festivals and so forth, then technically you're not supposed to. I don't know if anybody does, but part of that depends on the counties that you live in. Some counties interpret the law a little bit different. Some counties are a little more gung-ho in enforcing said laws. So a lot of it just depends on the individual counties that you're in. But pollen is just like honey. You need to have the weight on it, contact information, and so forth. You know, there doesn't really seem to be a big concern about the metric system anymore as far as having the metric equivalent on your jars. So I don't know if they're overly enforcing that, but it's not a bad idea to have the metric equivalent on there. That is the law. You're supposed to have that information on there as well as the ounces. So you know, but I don't think there's a lot of enforcement going on along those lines. So just keep that in mind. But you can legally sell pollen just like honey at roadside stands or farmers markets, but any other venues
We're out of your home.
or out of your home. But
Look what you did now.
but
That was your hive that fell over. That was your hive that fell over back there.
He didn't hear it.
He didn't hear
What
that.
you got outside?
I'm gonna limb off a tree.
Yeah, right.
So you can run into issues with the Board of Health. You know, like I said, they interpret some of the laws a little bit different. But as long as you're selling at farmers markets or roadside stands, then you're perfectly fine. Yes.
So I think somebody asked earlier, and I don't know if you answered it or I didn't hear it. So how do you package your pollen for sale?
Most of my pollen I sell in 1 pound honey jars, and you can buy jars that are designed more for pollen. It's the one that's got the little bee on the upper corner of the jar. It's broader, it's thinner, so you know the amount looks larger. It's just like the invertible jars, 1 pound invertible jars. If you put a 1 pound invertible jar next to a 1 pound regular jar, it looks like the invertible jar is a lot bigger, but it's just the optical illusion. But I mean, you can put them in. You put it in a 2 pound jar, then you end up with a pound of honey. I mean, you can do that as well. But most of the pollen that I sell is in 1 pound jars.
You did a quick calculation, if you took a tablespoon a day, you'd probably use about 1.5 gallons a year.
But sources for pollen information, the internet. I mean, it's just, you know, like Gary said, you know, the internet, everything's got to be true on the internet, right?
Well,
But there's a lot of information out there. Some of the medical journals and so forth have a lot of information on bee pollen. You know, all the different things that it is good for. I mean, it's hard to believe that I'm 82 years old, but I've been taking pollen for a long time. But I'm just kidding. And you know, you're gonna find things that is said about pollen. You know, things such as you know, that the human body has a difficult time actually digesting pollen. Things like that. You know, that some of the, you know, there are experts out there that say, you know, there's not all that much to it. But part of the problem is this went back, you know, years ago, and there was a lot of individuals out there that was, you know, that just didn't believe all of it. But you know, keep in mind too that the pharmaceutical companies want to invest large amounts of money into something that can make large amounts of money in return. So with pollen, that's hard to do. So in this country, there's not a lot of research that actually goes on with pollen. You know, we could do a lot more research on pollen and find out just you know, what the benefits really are of pollen, just how healthy it is for you. You know, I think with all the if you get a breakdown of pollen, and I meant to bring that, you know, it can vary, like I said, but you know, there's a lot of good things in pollen, a lot of things that you're going to get in pollen that you're not going to get in other food supplies, food sources, you know, that are grown in ground that have been depleted of a lot of those things in the ground because of just constant crops being raised on it. The bees are going out here to trees, to you know, fields that aren't harvested, you know, in areas that where plants are growing that you know, they're growing in unharvested, untilled ground, and so there's a lot of good things in there for that reason. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry I couldn't get my computer working. There were probably some things I didn't touch on that I probably should have, but